Sir, we are live now.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome to all of you. We are again today on another episode of virtual media, and now we are discussing on uh, what part to salvation. That is the part two. In last Sunday, we have discussed part one, part two salvation, and it's presented by Dr. Muthu Veeramani sir. Muthu Veeramani sir is by profession is a doctor. He is a urologist. He is working in SIMS at Chennai Hospital. Out of his busy schedule, he made his beautiful presentation of last Sunday, and he uh, and he write all the salient features which Baba Sahib cover in our this part to salvation, and he also added with contemporary situation. So over to Muthu sir, and please explain first of all the half part in a few slides, and then we will go to next part of part to salvation. Sir.
Thank you, Rajendra. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, audible.
Yes. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Dear brothers and sisters, Jai Bhim to everyone. The path to salvation, we have had, there are 22 chapters. We have seen the 11 chapters in the last week. And those who were there in the first week, it is just a revision for them. For those who are joining new, I would like to sum up what we had discussed in the last week. So it is delivered in 1936. It is relevant today, and in this contention of the pandemic area, but it is relevant today. So the first chapter, he was introducing the audience about and thanking the organizers and the people have gathered there. And he was explaining why the conference was conducted only for Mahars. And he was justifying why it is not constituted all the people of untouchables. And he is ready to hold meetings separately for every in these untouchables and to get a opinion for them. The next part, he was discussing about the material aspect of conversion. What is the material aspect of conversion? He says there are two aspects. It has got social as well as a religious aspect, and it has got a material and a spiritual aspect. In that, he was describing the atrocities, the effect of untouchability, like the untouchability practice faced by the untouchables in India during that time, but it is practiced nowadays also. That is what describing in the first part. And the second, next chapter is describing about is it a matter of class struggle? It is not a struggle between an individual. It is a struggle for survival, and it's a matter of injustice being done by one class to another class. So how to survive is asking us to think. And the third part, for escaping, we need a strength. And what are the strength? He is saying that do we have a manpower, financial power, and mental power to attain further this thing. Next is why we are facing this oppression. It is because of the tyranny of the Hindus and the Chaturvarna and the untouchability practiced by the caste Hindus. And he is quoting an example: as long as you are there in the Hindu fold, you have to face this oppression. But there are some Muslims in your village, but they are not facing that. Because why? Because even the whole community of Muslim is going to help them if there is any problem for them. And if you are not able to get any strength from within, like within the Hindu, as long as you are in the Hindu fold, you are not going to get any help from inside. So we have to search from outside. That's what he is saying. And whenever there is any problem or any atrocities against you, and the people around you, even like Hindus or Christians, they not do not rush to rescue the untouchables. What's that? Because what business do we have to interfere? Yeah, and if you would have been in our religion, we would have helped you. That is what the answer from them. So the next aspect is they're discussing about the spiritual aspect of conversion, where it wants that they create an ideal egalitarian society that brings the happiness and togetherness. And he describing about the society as well as the individual. He described how the society is there, how the caste Hindu system is available in our practicing in a day-to-day activity. And he is talking about the individual and progress of the individual. Individual means if the individual progress, then only the society progress. That is what he describes. And if a group of people is not, they're not allowed to learn or need to have money or then how can you expect a progress of the society? That's what he was implies. And then he asked, do we have a sympathy or equality and liberty in Hindu religion? Then he's asking, why do I stick on to that? When he was talking about sympathy, equality, and liberty, and he describing the atrocities and the science and philosophy in Hinduism, finally he come to conclusion that those who claim the social reformer and from within Hinduism, you can call them as hypocrites. And finally he described what is the freedom, what liberty you have in Hindu religion. And he described who is the free man. A person whose mind is not free, though he is not in chain, he is a slave. Those who are in whose mind is not free, though he is not in jail, he is a prisoner. But their mind is not free, though he is in life, he is almost like a dead. So freedom of mind is the proof of one's existence. Coming to the new chapters, like the next chapter, how the untouchables and organization of conversion. And here what he described, how the untouchability among ourselves. There are subcaste practiced, like he says the Chokamela, Harijan, and different subcaste in the Mahar's regime. And we are also practicing untouchability, like the Mahars may not touch the scavengers, and he raises a question, and the Hindus can ask, what right these people have to expect from others about the non-observance of practice of untouchability. And the Hindus may say that, the caste Hindus may say that first abolish the caste system among yourselves, then come to us, because there is untouchability among you people. So first try to abolish that. That is what the caste Hindus is going to say that. Then he says that there is a little truth in this argument, but the allegations are absolutely false. They are false in the say, it is who is responsible for this crime? The casteism and untouchability are originated from the high caste Hindus, that is the Chaturvarna, and Hindus are responsible for that. We have learned from them. That is what he describes. And untouchability among the untouchable, he says that we have just follow the lessons taught by the caste Hindus. If this lesson is not true, the burden of its being untruthful falls on those who taught it. That means that is on the caste Hindus, not on those who learned it. But he is not happy with the reply. It is not satisfying. Well, that's what he says. It does not satisfy me, though we are not responsible for the caste. It will be insane for not to fight them, but to allow them to continue. But we are responsible for their annihilation. That is, then he says that, have you ever thought how the efforts toward the abolition of caste can be made successful? It is not possible by, it cannot be possible by abolition by intercaste dining and intercaste marriages. It is a state of mind. Caste is a state of mind. It is a disease of the mind. And the teachings of the Hindu religions are the root cause for this. So we practice casteism and we observe untouchability because we are asked to do this by the Hindu religion. So how quoting an example, how we can, it is a changing poison to amrit. Like it's like any taste, like a bitter can be changed to sweet, but poison cannot be made into an amrit. So as long as we remain in a religion which teaches a man to treat and a man as a leper, and the sense of discrimination which is deeply rooted in our minds cannot go. So changing the religion is the only antidote. That is what he proposed. So the next chapter he describes about that is a distinction between the change in name and the change in religion. So in he has what sort of see, he describes what sort of relationship we have with the Hindu caste Hindus, like the Christians and Muslims. Though they don't have any relationship with the caste Hindus, they are not allowed in that temples. But when they see the Muslims and they treat equally, but it is not by the to the untouchables. So so like many of us, if you see in North India, many of the surnames, if you, that describes it's your caste in your name. So normally nobody can change the name unless certain condition demand it. So when you are traveling, if you it's quite common. It happened to many of us would have been experienced this. And when you are traveling, an unknown person, he will ask your name, but you cannot distinguish touchable and untouchable. Whereas a Hindu religion person, high caste Hindu, he will ask your name. And we practice casteism in every walk of our life. Like if your name itself depicts, and if you, where you reside, like in the, if you are staying in Ambedkar Street, then they may think you are from so and so. And if your area, like the untouchables are segregated in a part in a village, especially in the villages. And as long as they don't know, they will exchange pleasantries. And as soon as he come to know that you are untouchable, there is a sense of hatred germinates in his mind, and he thinks that he is deceived. That means he was cheated. He gets angry. Ultimately, this friendship ends and in abuses, and ends in the quarrels. So why does all this happen? It's because the name, what you depict, it is considered a filthy and create a vomiting sensation for Hindus. And by calling yourself by a caste name, people understand that what you are, and by your actions, you have proved the necessity for the change of name. Then what is the objection? Should be there to change your religion. Changing the religion is almost like a changing the name. So people may that change of religion followed by change of name will be more beneficial. Both, if you do change your religion as well as change of name, that will be more beneficial to you. If you call oneself as a Muslim or a Christian or a Buddhist or Sikh, it is not merely change of religion. That is real change of the name. The new name will not have any filth attached to it, and no one will search for the origin of it. So if you ask me, why should you not change your name permanently by changing your religion? The next chapter describes about the role of opponents. There are so-called Hindu social reformers. They pretend to preach you and advise you, saying that the religions. So, many of the Hindus, many of the Muslims or Christians or Sikhs in the present era, they might have been they are originally might have either Sudras or untouchables. They are converted. If you see their transformation, the socio-economic status, that is completely changed. That is what he describes that, and they may claim that religion is not a thing that can be consumed, and the religion cannot be changed as we change our work daily. If you wish to leave the Hindu religion, they think that the ancestors who are clung to this religion so far, in a long period were fools. I do not find any substance in this objection or argument. The ancestral religion, so-called the Vedic religion, it is a religion has a distinct characteristics of beef eating, drinking, and merrymaking. That was the religion of that day. And if somebody says that you stuck to your ancestral religion, only a congenital idiot can say that. No sane man will accept such a proposition. And its ancestral religion is a Chaturvarna system. That means the Brahmins were permitted to learn, and the Kshatriyas were to fight, and Vaishyas to learn, and Sudras finally you have to serve. You have no learning, no property, no food, and no clothing. Do you think your ancestors was forced to live in this penniless, armless conditions, and there is no possibilities of revolt? I cannot say that they remained there as a voluntarily, because they were forced to live there in the religion. It was a slavery forced upon them. Our ancestors had no means to fight, because you don't have any money, you don't have any land, no trade, and they were forced to live in that, and they could not revolt. They were compelled to live in this religion, but nobody can force any type of slavery on the new generation, because if the present generation do not avail this such a freedom, this conversion, one will have to call them as most regretfully most mean, slavish, and dependent people who ever lived on that. So think that is you have to convert. That is what he proposed. Then comes to the next topic. He is describing what is the difference between man and animal. No sane person will accept an argument. You have to stuck to your ancestral religion and the circumstances in which you are living at present. It may be an worthy advice for animals, but it can never be for a man. Man has to progress, but animal cannot. That is, no progress can be made without change. So conversion is a sort of change, and your ancestral religion cannot be a hindrance in the path of a progressive man. Some may argue, like the so-called Hindu social reformers, and the conversion is sort of an escapism. And I have my personal opinion about the Hindu reformers. I personally have a nausea for them. I have no regard for them. That those people who live in their own caste, die in their own caste, married in their own caste, should be fool the people with the false slogan saying, we will break the caste, is really surprising. So the slogan by the reformers, so-called, we will break the caste, and the Hindu social, I would like to quote an example. The efforts of white American people for emancipation of the blacks. The blacks and the untouchables are in the same condition. The difference is they had a sanction by the law, but for us, it is a religion that is what preventing us. White Americans sacrificed their life and their kith and kin in a civil war for the emancipation of blacks. But our Hindu, so-called Hindu social reformers, they are prepared to fight a civil war with a Hindu brethren, and if not, why this proclamation of reforms? And I would like to quote Mahatma Gandhiji as a social reformer who claimed to fight for the cause for untouchables, who was fought non-violent agitation against the British government for the freedom, but he was not willing to launch a peaceful satyagraha against the Hindus, against untouchability. He is not even prepared to take a legal action against the Hindus. What is the good of such Hindu reformer for us? That is, the next chapter is about discussing about, does the fault lie with the untouchables alone? Here, he described about the Hindus, the so-called the Hindus, they advise our untouchable brothers. They say that you live clean, educate yourself, stand on your own feet. And who has to be blamed for the stigma and disability. It is the caste Hindus alone. No one will try to gather these caste Hindus and preach to them, but they will preach to the untouchable to continue their agitation with the help of Hindus and by remaining in the Hindu fold. There is a historical quote from the World War II. There is a conversation between an American soldier and English soldier, and the American soldier asked the English soldier how long the war should be continued. The Englishman says that pride, with a pride, we shall fight until the last Frenchman dies, because he will not lose the Englishman. The same as like a Hindu reformers, they proclaim to fight against untouchability. It means that they propose to fight till the last untouchable dies. As I understand from this their proclamation, one who fights for the cause at the cost of their lives of others cannot be expected to win the battle. If we are to die in our struggle for freedom, what is the use of fighting in a wrong place, sitting in the Hindu fold and fighting? To reform the Hindu society is neither our aim nor our field of action. Our aim is to gain freedom from the untouchability. If we gain our freedom from conversion, why should we shoulder the responsibility for the reform of the Hindu religion? Why should we sacrifice our strength and property for liberation from the Hindu religion? And do you have any equality, untouchables or need equality? And there are two ways we can achieving equality. One, by remaining within the Hindu fold. By remaining within the Hindu fold, you may have a mere removal, a sense of being an untouchable, or an untouchable will not serve the purpose. Equality can be achieved only when there is an intercaste dynasty and marriages take place. That means your religion is not allowing to have a intercaste dynasty and marriages. The Chaturvarna must be abolished and the religion must be uprooted. Is it possible? It is not at all possible. Then why you want to stick on to the religion of Chaturvarna system? The path of conversion is far, far simpler than this. So please follow that. And if not, will it be wise to expect a equality treatment by remaining in the Hindu religion? Can you be successful in your efforts to bring equality as long as in the Hindu? Of course not. The Hindu society, they treat equally the Muslims and Christians and others. But obviously, the social equality is not achieved by this conversion. If this is true, then why should you not adopt the simple path of conversion? So as long as you remain in Hindus, you have to struggle for a social intercourse, food and water, and intercaste marriages. The relationship between you and the Hindus will be strained. You will be their perpetual enemies. By conversion, it brings happiness for both Hindus as well as the untouchables. And it ends all the quarrels will be vanished. You need not claim any right for temple entry. No reason for you to struggle for the social rights. Once these quarrels will exist, then the mutual love and affection will have automatically develop between the caste Hindus and the untouchables. And also by conversion, you can see that the Hindus treat the Muslims and the Christians, they love each other and treat each other, though they have no intercaste marriages, no intercaste dining with them. And why there is a stepmotherly attitude towards you? Just because only because you live in the Hindu religion, but that's by conversion. If the equality can be achieved, an affinity between the Hindus and untouchables can be brought. The conversion is the only right path for freedom, which ultimately leads to equality. It is neither cowardice nor an escapism. So Hindus may argue, say that conversion is worthless. If you do it out of frustration with the caste system, even among the Muslims and Christians, they have a caste system? But it is not we accept that there is a caste system among the Muslims and Christians, but it is not their chief characteristic of their social body. The disease actually originally started from the Hindus, and therefore it thereafter infected others. And there is a distinction in the caste among the Hindus versus other religions. And the caste system among the Hindus has the foundation of the religion, whereas the castes in other religion have no sanction of their religion. If the Hindus proclaim to disband the caste system, they have to disband the religion will come in there. Whereas if the other religion like a Muslims and a Christian, they want to fight against the caste system, their religion is not going to come in their way. Rather, their religion will support such movement to greater such extent. So what can be done by the conversion alone? Some Hindu sympathizers, they may ask you, let us improve our financial or educational status. So the Baba Sahib says that, who is going to improve your financial and educational condition? You have to do yourself. Those who are argue as above, and every Hindu tries to improve their own economic status of his own caste. His outlook is limited to his own caste alone. They don't bother about you. If a high caste Hindu, like any Brahmin, you can experience, many of you would have educated people would have experienced this. If he establishes an hospital, he will secure jobs only for the unemployed of their caste. They will provide scholarship from the money comes out of the organization to their people. So Saraswats, they are one of the high caste people. They are doing the same thing. So we have to establish our own institutes and organization. Then only we can support our people. That is the need for that. When you say that everybody is for himself, and you have to think those who have no benefactor or at the mercy of God. If you have to rise yourself, or if you have no one else to come for your right, what is the purpose is listening to the advice of the caste Hindus? There is no other motive in such advice but to misguide you and kill your time. If you want to improve yourself, no need to pay attention to this gossip. And he proposed to refute this argument, and that is what the next is. Sometimes people can ask what can be achieved by the conversion alone. There is conversion alone. The many people, those who converted, and many of the Muslims or Christians or Buddhists or Sikhs, they are the Sudras or untouchables in the previous eras. Now you can see their socio-economic status, and that can be seen nowadays. And the Hindu sympathizer may argue that nothing can be achieved by conversion is another implied meaning, and they may say that some of the atheists may say that religion is bogus and useless. There is neither a gain nor a religion, nor a loss from the religion. Then we can ask them, why do they advocate this argument to insist upon the untouchables remain in the Hindu religion? Why should they unnecessarily argue against the conversion? What can be achieved by conversion alone? Something he proposed, like what can be achieved by self-government alone? If your financial and educational progress is the condition precedent for freedom, what is the good of self-government? If the country is benefited by the self-government alone, the untouchables are also bound to be benefited by the conversion. And everybody will have to admit that conversion is necessary to the untouchable as the self-government is to the India. So there is a recent article, it is the census of 2011, where they assess the progress of Dalits who are converted, and they assess the literacy, gender equality, and well-being of Dalits, those who are converted. And then they analyze the Buddhists. They say that 87% of the Buddhist population in India or most of them are Dalits, and they spread throughout India. Only 13% of the Buddhists, they are mostly they are in the northeast region, and the literacy rate of those who converted to Buddhism, their rate is about 81.29%, higher than the national average, and that is what the conversion brings. And the literacy rate among the Hindus is only 73%, where the scheduled castes have the lower literacy rate of 66%. The same with the gender parameters, female literacy rate, sex rate, all are better than the national average. That can be seen by the census in a 2011 census. Some people may ask whether progress or conversion, which one has to be first. Babasaheb says that I do not agree with the view economic progress should precede the conversion. How can you achieve the economic progress as long as the stigma of untouchability attached to you? If you are educated and if you are opening, you have a good money, you have a finance, if you open a shop or applying for a job, you want to sell your land or purchase a land. As long as you are in the Hindu fold, your untouchability is a permanent handicap on your path of progress. The chief cause for your unemployment is untouchability. Without conversion, this hurdle cannot be removed. There are some doubts about the conversion, about the people who are the Hindu sympathizers. There are more, especially I would like to clarify the doubts expressed by the sympathizers. What will happen to our Wharton job for the market? It is it's like a very low level job, though it is like inherited through the skin. But Babasaheb says that this is not going to do by conversion, because that act under the provision of Act 1850, you have every right, even you have after conversion, your right is going to come with you. And the next is talking about the political rights. Political right is what we have now. It is like if you say it is a reservation, and he says that nobody else has taken so much pain and effort for bringing this political rights for the untouchable for I have done. But I feel that it is not proper to depend solely on the political rights. They are granted then a condition that they will not be everlasting, and they are bound to be lost in some point of time. According to the communal award by the Britishers, the political rights meant only for 20 years. And although such a limitation has been fixed by Pune Pact, nobody can say that they are everlasting. Those who depend on political rights, what will happen? A day on which our political right is going to stop and social rights is, we need a social strength in us. The strength cannot be achieved without conversion. So political rights are mainly based on your population. The political safeguards for any society will increase with the increase of population. In my opinion, conversion is the only remedy for eternal bliss. Nobody should hesitate, even if our political rights are required to be sacrificed for this purpose. Hindus will ask you the futuristic questions some point of time. That's what happening now in our current situation. The untouchability has been abolished by law. This is now the current this thing, untouchability is a punishmentable act. But if you go to the village, the untouchability is still practiced. You are no longer untouchables. You are simply poor and backward. They may compare you with the OBC. Then why should you be given such a political safeguard? What will be your reply to these questions? Now come to the conclusion part. He says he is sure for conversion. His conversion is not for material thing. but his conversion is purely out of spiritual attitude. But he tells us, our conversion will be both for material as well as spiritual kind. And the religion preaches a life after death. And those who enjoyed their life, they will think about the after death, not for the poor, those who are in a religion where they are reduced to the state of dust and have been denied the basic necessities of the life, such as food and clothing, have not been treated as a human being, and they completely loss of being a human. Are these people not supposed to think of religion from the material point of view? Finally, he come to say that religion is for man and not man for religion. For getting a human treatment, you have to convert yourself. Convert for getting it organized. Convert for becoming strong. Convert for getting liberty. Convert so that your domestic life should be happy. And a religion that propagate touch, untouchability, not being treating a human being, it's a display of force. It is a disease. And he says it's a mockery, which precludes some classes from education, forbids them to accumulate wealth and to bear arms. It's a mockery of human being. A religion that compels the ignorant to be ignorant and the poor to be poor is not a religion, but a punishment. And he finally come to say that who is the leader? The leader who, without fear and favor, tells the people what is good and what is bad for them. And it is my duty to tell you what is good for you, even if you don't like it. That is my duty. That is what Baba said. He is like a fatherly man to his family member. It is, and he says that it is now for you to decide and discharge your responsibility. And he says that there are two problems of conversion. The part one, he has described the atrocities and the problem is the Hindu religion. And now we have to take a decision whether to leave the Hindu religion or to rebel. And in the part two is that what other religion should be adopted, or whether the new religion should be established or not. And he throw the question to the audience. I wish to know your decision on the first part. Then only if we can prepare ourselves. If you decide against conversion, this question will be closed forever. If you decide in favor, and you people have to promise me in organize an en masse conversion. And you can start, but you can embrace any religion. I am not coming in your way. And I wish you all join me, whatever religion we may accept. However, he also asked the people to justify yourself. Don't lead away by the emotion and follow me only because I say so. You should concern only it appeals to your reason. You have to reason, you have to justify yourself. I will not feel hungry, and if you decide not to join me. Rather, I will be relieved of my responsibility. You must bear in mind that your today's decision will carve out a path of prosperity for future generations. Hence, yours is the most difficult task to take. And the final part, he comes before end the session, be your own light. He quotes Buddha's final message to the bhikkhus when he was sick and is in last illness, and Ananda's requesting Lord Buddha, what is your last message to the bhikkhus? Because and Buddha says, Ananda, what does the Sangha expect from me? I have preached the Dhamma with an open heart, without concealing anything. And I have not kept anything concealed as someone others teachers do. So Ananda, what more can I tell to the bhikkhus? Finally, he proposes the Mahaparinibban Satta. That means be self-illuminating like a lamp. Don't be dependent for light like a earth. Don't be a satellite. Be a light into the self. Believe in self. Don't depend on others. Be truthful. Always take a refuge in the truth. Do not surrender to anybody. I also take a, and Baba Sahib also proposed the same words: be your own guide, take a refuge in reason, do not listen to the advice of others, do not succumb to others, be truthful, take a refuge in truth, never surrender to anybody. I am sure your decision will not be wrong. Thank you so much, Rajendra, for giving this opportunity. I will end this. Rajendra.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you have done wonderful job. Part first to part second, whole things very well described. And I think crux of this two session is the social freedom. That is the ultimate goal of human existence. So we have to be free from our religious and any other things. We have to open our mind in all the way, and we have to think in totality. And one more thing in a slide, that be on your light. So in Hindi we can say Appo Deepa Bhava. That is a very famous quote of Baba Sahib and Gautam Buddha. So it is important documents which is Baba Sahib speech delivered at 31 May 1936 on Mahar Conference, and later it is published as a path to salvation, or in Marathi I think Mukti Kaun Pathe. So I am very thankful, and over to Sonika.
Thank you so much, Rajan sir. And thank you, Dr. Muthu Viramani sir. It was really very nice presentation you have prepared. And in our last webinar also, everybody was liking the presentation and they were requesting us to share the presentation. And regarding Muthu sir, I want to say to our viewers that he is a very eminent doctor. He is a urologist and he's from Chennai. And this presentation he has prepared is a very useful and very easy to grasp the things regarding the path to salvation. So it is a request that everybody should go through the presentation, and they can get a more from this presentation. So once again, thank you, Muthu sir. And we are with us Jatinder Singh sir and Sneha ma'am. Ma'am, you want to have some
concluding remarks or any questions regarding
any questions regarding this? Okay, before we end, I would like to request Muthu sir to please have 2 minutes if you want to say about the presentation.
Yeah, the presentation is like a visual reading, but before seeing the presentation, you should go through the full text.
Yeah.
Because you cannot miss a single word of the full text. It carries a different meaning. Even if you take out a single word, the meaning changes. So always, and every time you read, you get a new understanding of that. So always you keep reading like a fourth time, fifth time, sixth time. Every time you grasp a new point from the talk. Though it is a 19 pages, but it is a voluminous enough to give more knowledge to the reader.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Once again, I am very thankful to you for this act of kindness. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are very thankful to our team, IDF, and also Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Caravan for organizing such a wonderful webinar. And we got so many ideas and suggestions how to read this wonderful book article. So once again, thank you so much, Dr. Muthu Viramani sir, and thank you, Dr. Rajen sir, for arranging this webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Sonika.
Okay.